Morning and welcome to a Friday, January the 13th, Friday for Future edition of the OBX Wave Report. We're going to do a lot of Friday for Future foci. I think that is the correct terminology for today. But first, let's look at the Outer Banks here at the OBX Wave Report, where we discuss all things waves, weather, climate, and beach lifestyle. And boy, are we going to talk a lot about climate today. And so we are going to do a Friday for future focus on climate science and extreme weather, and in particular, record global warmth in the climate system. And we'll get into that later, but we're going to focus in on some scientists, some of our top scientists who are tracking the climate crisis in real time and who has served as a voice of warning, both warning and resolve for action involving a rapid transition to clean energy, as well as doing all the other things to help reduce atmospheric carbon, but the center of gravity being a rapid transition to clean energy and a rapid reduction and then cessation in the burning of fossil fuels, which is the primary driver of the climate crisis. All right, so for today, though, for the Outer Banks, getting down to the more granular local level here, the Outer Banks is definitely one of the hotspots in the US for climate impacts. It is rather low level as far as elevation, and it juts out into the Atlantic Ocean. So storms tend to strike the Outer Banks with a higher frequency than most other regions of the United States, particularly oceanic storms. And oceanic storms are fueled by rising sea surface temperatures. And then in addition to that, we've got sea level rise that does impact the Outer Banks a bit more, considering that it is both low-lying, that it juts out into the Atlantic Ocean, and that the Outer Banks are basically a string of overgrown sandbars that nature has pushed around in the past. So it already has a vulnerability even in the baseline climate level, but that vulnerability is enhanced as the storms intensify and gain more fuel due to warming oceans, and as the sea levels continue to rise. And so those of us here on the Outer Banks are on point. When it comes to climate, we are, whether we know it, whether we accept it, whether we like it or not, we are right here on the tip of the spear confronting the impacts of the climate crisis. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about today. Today we have a weather event. It's nothing too radical, too extreme, too crazy, nothing like what California is experiencing. And hopefully that California is seeing a bit of respite coming in the future, although the impacts for California are still quite intense. The events here, though, are more mild, more moderate, although they can seem kind of intense. Last night we had some thunderstorms rolling through and our cats hid under the bed. It was a bit intense. Some bursts of heavy rain, and up and down the coastline we've got rising waves and gale watches and some impacts from this frontal system that is coming through. Again, this is not a major storm, but it is a storm. And I do want to show you the National Weather Service radar and the radar picture and the alerts showing for our region out here in the Manteo and Nags Head and Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk region of the Outer Banks in Dare County here. And right now we've got a gale watch and small craft advisories up as strong winds blow in from the southwest and the west southwest, associated with a frontal system. And you can also see the storms and thunderstorms associated with the frontal boundary that is sweeping on through. And this is definitely kicking up the surf. We've got gale watches all up and down the Outer Banks here. And then even further south as you get um, into the more sheltered waters, you get small craft advisories. But the gale watches are up, the small craft advisories are up, and the surf is up. And I do want to show you the infrared satellite picture here, so you can see this front sweeping on through with the higher cloud tops. Again, where we've had some pretty intense thunderstorm activity throughout the night time, and most of those storms now are pushing off to the east, heading out into the North Atlantic. And you can see yet another system impacting California. These systems just are, hitting California again and again and again. And today is no exception, although, there does appear to be some let up for the Southern California area. And I'll get into that more later. All right, so moving down to the ocean and looking at the wave heights, we have rather larger significant wave heights in the near offshore region in the range of 7 feet for 7 to 7.5 to even 8 feet for the beaches to the south, and then around 5 to 6 feet in the near off, well, it looks like 5 to 7 feet in the near offshore environment for beaches to the north. Some of these swells are translating into the coastline, and we have anything from 2 to 3 foot surf in some of the east and northern beaches, and so the northern beaches up here in Dare County in like Nags Head and Kitty Hawk, for example. And then the further south you go, the more the swell tends to rise. So as you get down to Buxton, the waves are a bit higher, with coastal observations showing waves and swells in the range of 4 to 7 feet. And then down at Billy Mitchell for the south-facing beaches, we've got 5 to 8 foot surf. And I'm going to drill down to those observations. It's just a little bit of a foretaste. So let's go ahead and do our local observations as we do every day. So heading up the coastline here to Jeanette's Pier, which is pretty local to me. And right now, Jeanette's Pier is experiencing 2 to 3 foot surf, with a primary swell coming in at 8 seconds and a secondary swell coming in at 12 seconds. Winds are out of the southwest at 15 miles per hour. That's a pretty stiff offshore flow there. Winds have kicked up quite a bit over the past day, and we expect high winds to dominate throughout the Outer Banks for the next 3 days. For about the next 3 days, for the next 48 to 72 hours. Air temperatures right now at Jeanette's Pier are 56 degrees Fahrenheit. It's about as warm as it's going to get for today as temperatures fall with the passage of that front through the afternoon. Ocean water temperatures in the range of 51 degrees Fahrenheit. So cold water, have your cold water gear handy if you're going to go out and brave the surf today. Weather right now is cloudy, and that's the case here in Manteo as well. High temperature for today was probably around 56, maybe a little bit warmer, and temperatures are falling, and it's expected to remain windy and possibly get a bit windier throughout the day. Moving on down south to Buxton, we're going to go to one of the spots that tends to get most of the swells here in the Outer Banks, and Buxton is definitely it. It's, as I said before, a general big wave spot for the Outer Banks, although the bigger waves are here on the south-facing beaches. Buxton's close enough to get that wraparound, and we're getting the wraparound here at Buxton with wave heights and swell heights in the range of 4 to 7 feet based on observations. The primary swell is coming in at 8 seconds, secondary swell coming in at 12 seconds. Winds are out of the west-southwest at 22 miles per hour, which is a strong offshore flow. So very strong winds blowing out of Buxton here with that large swell, and that swell is probably going to solidify throughout the day. Air temperatures are 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Ocean water temperatures are 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Weather conditions are It's raining right now, and we expect rain throughout the afternoon, well, showers throughout the afternoon. And the expected high today of 65 has likely already been reached, and we're expecting to see windy conditions for Buxton. Now, moving on down to Billy Mitchell Airport. And here we have the largest observed wave conditions for the Outer Banks today, with wave heights in the range, wave and swell heights in the range of 5 to 8 feet, with an 8-second primary swell and an 11-second secondary swell. Winds are out of the west-southwest at 20 miles per hour, which is the angle of the west-southwest winds is kind of like this, so it's a slightly onshore with a cross-shore component, so an onshore flow here with the west-southwest winds. And with those 20 mile per hour sustained winds, that's pretty strong. Air temperatures are in the range of 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Ocean water temperatures in the range of 62. Still pretty cool out there. Make sure you've got your cold weather protection, although you won't need as much down south as you do up north. Rain is expected in come in showers sporadically throughout the afternoon and before tapering off in the evening. Expected high today of 65 was likely already reached, and windy conditions are expected to dominate for Billy Mitchell today. I do want to talk about, let's see, yep. So this is for our next. I'm going to go back to the Earth and Hill School model and talk a little bit more about conditions for the Outer Banks before I go on to my next report. And let's go ahead and just look at base conditions and what's expected to change. Right now, we've got a frontal system that is swept on through. And over the next day or so, this front is expected to see some impulses of like low pressure systems swirling up along the front. And you can see these little divots in the front appear in the wind fields. You can tend to see the low pressure systems form as swirls all along a frontal zone. And so as we get into the day on Saturday, we've got kind of an elongated trough digging in here through the near coastal waters just offshore of the mid-Atlantic in the northeast. And then we start to get a low here forming off the mid-Atlantic, a more consolidated low. And then this low is predicted to bounce around off the North Atlantic, bottled in by a high pressure system out here to the east. And then that low jumps around. Yesterday in the models, it kind of went in retrograde a bit. It's more just lingering, although there is some retrograde motion to the south here. And then as it bounces around, it's then expected to recurve toward the coastline by, let's see, that's Saturday 14th. So by Monday, expected to recurve toward the coastline and then kind of linger over Newfoundland and the Maine area as another low pressure system starts to sweep in across the Great Lakes region. And a feature of note here is this elongated blocking high pressure system that's kind of bottling up the storms here and causing a little bit of a collision of storms here for the US East and Northeast by Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm going to go ahead and back up the models and show you guys the waves or the expected wave type features for the Outer Banks and the near coastal regions. So this storm offshore will tend to generate a swell for the Outer Banks for the coming days. And so for today, we've got 5 to 7 foot significant wave heights in the near offshore environment. By tomorrow, the winds shift around to the north and we get a northerly swell with 7 to 8 foot significant wave heights for the north and east facing beaches. And then by Sunday, the waves kick up to 8 to 9 significant wave heights for the east facing and the northeast facing beaches as the coastal low develops and strengthens. And then we get into Monday. Yes, so we get into Monday and the significant wave heights in the near offshore waters are 8 feet with that coastal low still involved and those winds coming out of the north and northwest. And let's see if we can get one more out of this. Yep. So, and then as we get into Tuesday, the low has moved off more to the north, but you still have some pretty high significant wave heights in the near offshore environment in the range of about 4.5 to 6 feet for most of the Outer Banks. So wave conditions expected to be pretty high for the Outer Banks as we have a combination of front moving through and low pressure system in the coastal environment developing. Right now we've got potential for gale force conditions in the near offshore waters. And let's go back to I want to go back to the air models and see what we're looking at for winds. Let's back this up. Okay, yeah, this is one of those models where you have to move it. Okay, so let's go to now. I could have just hit the now button. Okay, so we have southerly and westerly winds right now across the Outer Banks, and they're pretty strong, but they're nothing too crazy right now. And then throughout the day, these winds are expected to strengthen into strong and in some cases near gale force conditions as we get into Saturday. Actually, I don't see any near gale force. I just see strong winds in this model. And then these are northerly winds. These northerly winds are expected to maintain through Saturday with the development of that coastal low. And here we start to get into the near gale force conditions into early Sunday. And then looks like strong winds remaining out of the north throughout Sunday and into Monday, and then lightening up as we get into later in the day on Monday. So windy conditions throughout the weekend and then calming as we get into the week. But the swells are expected to maintain then for a few days following the movement of the storm to the north and east. So high wave conditions, a little bit stormy here in the Outer Banks right now, and these higher wave conditions are expected to maintain throughout the weekend and into early next week. So thank you for joining me for the OBX Wave Report here on this Friday, January the 13th, another Friday for future. And as we look to the future, please do everything you can to help accelerate the transition to clean energy, to stop the fossil fuel burning that is the main driver of the climate crisis, which is producing so many impacts and threats to those of us both living on the coastline and pretty much all over the face of the earth. So thank you for joining me again, and I will be